Sacred Heart is proud to sponsor Pensacola Histories in recognition of the Daughters of Charity who brought their mission of care to Pensacola over 90 years ago.
Welcome to our stories of Pensacola, Florida, the nation's oldest attempted settlement. In our previous 3 episodes, we talked about the beginnings of exploration of Florida, then the selection of Don Tristan DeLuna to head an expedition or a task force which was to establish 2 settlements in North America from which the Spanish might work to literally enclose a defense of the entire continent against other foreign countries. We talked about the arrival here of DeLuna with his 1,550 people and how a terrible storm on the 4th night destroyed all of the ships, the supplies, and left the survivors of that storm literally without resource here, and of how next they began to try to locate the Indian settlements, which they knew were here somewhere nearby. And indeed, they had done so. In the last episode, we had talked about the move of the cavalry from the Indian village near Pensacola of Nanacapana to the Indian settlement at Coosa, which today would be about, well, where Albertville, Alabama is now. Well, they arrived. Major Del Sal's arrived with Domingo de Santo Domingo, the head of the friars, and they made friends with the chief. And things went well. And finally, after about a month, when they felt things were going smoothly, Del Sal said, well, now let's take the next step. We want to be sure we're well enough established with these folks that we can finally ask them if we can bring the balance of all of DeLuna's people here for the rest of the winter. And so they said, well, the first thing we ought to do is to conduct a mass. Let's hold a religious service. And so they went to the chief, and the chief said, well, he had no idea what this was, but fine, we'll do that. And so picture this, we're out in a clearing there at Coosa, and the Spanish put together what we would today call an altar, like the table like in front, and they put a bower of pine boughs over the top, just made it look very nice. And Domingo de Santo Domingo was prepared to conduct a mass. Now all of the Spanish soldiers were over here on his right. All of the Indians were seated there on the ground to the left, and the service began. And Domingo de Santo Domingo was a wonderful provider. He did an excellent job. Now, as those who know the service well will recognize, there comes a time in that service when the minister must put his chalice right in the very center of the altar, and he then moves around and stands in front of it and continues with the liturgy. Well, he did this, and as he turned his back, almost at once, a large worm begins to descend on a tiny web from the bower that was above it. Down, down, down it came. And of course, the Spanish on this side, they were horrified. What should we do? Should we jump and swat it away? Well, they knew that to do that would break the spell of the Mass. The Indians on this side were saying, well, this is very interesting. There's this part of the show. Well, down, down, down it came, and the worm went right to the very lip of the chalice and then fell off dead. Well, the Spanish were relieved. The Indians turned to one another and said, well, these folks have powerful magic. This is impressive. Once that was done and the people shook hands afterward, now Domingo de Santo Domingo and Del Sal said, all right, the time is right. We can now approach the chief and ask him if we can bring DeLuna's people here. And so they do. And the chief, who was a wily old man, he said, well, I figured there was something like this in the offing, but I didn't want to bring it up. But now that you say it, that I understand, and I'll tell you what we're going to do. We will be happy to host DeLuna and his people if you will help us. Now, you have no reason to know this, but we have been bothered for a long time by a very nasty group of other Indians who continue to move west out of Georgia and steal our crops, steal our women. They are just nasty people. And right now, we happen to know, our spies tell us that they are on the way here for a raid right now. Now, if you will help us with your thunder sticks, and we can drive these people away, then, of course, that will be fine. Then you can bring DeLuna on. Well, now, Major Del Sal and Domingo de Santo Domingo, they sit down with each other and say, now, what shall we do? If we do that, we'll gain the chief's approval. We bring DeLuna. If we don't do it, chances are he won't give us the okay. And either way we lose, because if we shoot at some of these other Indians, we may never be able to bring them to the true church. What shall we do? Well, Del Sal says, well, we have no choice. If we don't do it, DeLuna is going, and his people are going to starve. So they say, we'll do it. Well, now you have to picture this. It's a morning in the late fall. We're in Indian summer, and the temperature and the humidity are just right, and the encampment of the Coosa Indians is on the west side of a stream, a fairly good-sized river, and there's a ford here across which the invading Indians could come. So here is Del Sal's and his soldiers with their thundersticks, which were arquebus. Now, an arquebus was a huge rifle. It was 6 to 7 feet long, weighed about 60 pounds, and you had to have a tripod to put the barrel in to hold it steady. Now, it was hardly accurate. If you took aim at something directly ahead, you might hit something 75 degrees to the right. But nonetheless, it made a tremendous amount of noise. It fired a pellet about the size of a billiard ball. Okay, we're all set there on the bank, and here come the Georgia invaders. Del Sal's and his people are crouched down, waiting for them to come. And now, as the Indians are crossing the river, about halfway across through, about up to their waist in water, Del Sal's rises up and he says, "Fire!" And they do. Another miracle in our story. One of those arquebus pellets hits an invading Indian right smack in the chest and kills him. And thus we had probably the shortest war ever fought on North American soil. The Indians, the invading Indians were absolutely petrified. They stood there, they didn't know what to do. They quickly surrendered. A treaty was signed on birch bark, and the Coosa Indians were just as happy as they could be. Now the chief turns to Del Sal's and Santo Domingo and says, "All right, you have done your party, you have kept the bargain. You may send for DeLuna and bring the people here." And so Del Sal's assigns 7 members of the cavalry, and they get on their horses and ride off as quickly as they of course, they've been this route once. Now they have a pretty good idea how to travel, do it much more quickly, and they come to Nanacapata. They ride into the outskirts of the little village, and there's no one there. There are no Indians, no Spanish, but they finally find a piece of bark tacked against a tree with a little message written on it which says, "We feared that you were dead. We ran out of food. We have gone back to Oshus." Well, of course, the 7 messengers have no other choice. They take a nap, grab a bite of hardtack, and then start back for Oshus and arrive on the coast. And of course, by now, almost 14 months have passed since the arrival on the coast in August of 1559, and things have gone from bad to worse for the colonists. There have been 1 or 2 shipments of supplies from Mexico, but not much. And they've gotten less and less to eat. People have died. The children are terribly malnourished. Everything is going wrong. But now here come these 7 men with good news. And DeLuna, of course, receives, he can't believe how lucky he has been finally, and he sees a ray of hope. And he said, of course, we have to be honest about this. I think he also probably is still thinking about the family fortune, which is sitting on the bottom of the bay here in the hulls of those ships. Well, he immediately said, "All right, tomorrow morning, 0700, everyone falls out with full field pack. We are ready to march to Coosa." Juan Serran Saavedra, who is a realist and has been all the way through our story, comes to the commander and he says, "Sir, look at these people. They're starving. There's no way in the world you can ask them to march 200 miles through the wilderness here. They'll never do it." DeLuna insists. He says, "No, we must try. Tomorrow morning, 0700, these others will guide us. We'll go." Well, 7 o'clock the next morning comes, and about a dozen people turn out. Serran is right. The others are just unable to make the march. And so day after day, they sit there. DeLuna gives the same order, and the same result passes. So finally, he has an idea. He turns to the 7 men, the 7 cavalrymen, and he said, "I want you to go as quickly as you can to Coosa and tell Major Del Sal's to bring the cavalry back, bring a few of the cavalry back here. Not all, but a few of them. You want to maintain your position with the Indians. Bring some back here so that their horses can help the settlers here make the march." And so the 7 men get on their horses, and as quickly as they can, they get to Coosa. Now, what happens next is something that probably may have happened to you sometime in your life. When you were a child, you probably may have done it as an adult. You sat at a party and you played a game. And the game starts with somebody whispering a message to somebody on one side of a group, and he is supposed to pass it to the next, and to the next, and to the next, and the next. And of course, usually what happens is when it finally reaches the end of 10 or 12 or 14 people, there's very little resemblance to what started with. And that, unfortunately, is exactly what happened when the 7 men reached Major Del Sal's. The message was totally misinterpreted, so instead of sending a few people back, the entire cavalry now marches south and arrives in Oshus to the dismay of DeLuna. But now here you've got the whole group here, and of course DeLuna immediately said, well, with all these additional people we can make the march better. And Saran Cerveder says, look at them, sir, there's no way, because these people are just unable to walk, they're unable to crawl even. And so they sat. And day passes day, and things get worse. And finally we come to Maundy Thursday in the year 1561. Things have gotten so bad. And now for that day, Domingo de Santo Domingo asked DeLuna's permission to have a special mass, a celebration, asking God's help to possibly bring some miracle that will relieve them. And DeLuna, of course, says, yes, indeed, you may do that. Tomorrow morning, call the people together and we will have such a mass. And they do. Well, the assembly comes together and the friar proceeds, and then he does something very unique. About halfway through his own homily, instead of continuing in his own story, he turns to DeLuna and says, sir, we must look to you. So you must do something. I know you've done what you could, but some miracle is necessary. If it does not happen, we are all going to die. And DeLuna, the story goes, DeLuna literally broke down and cried in front of his group because he had done what he could and everything seemed to work against him. Well, the day ended and we come to the following morning. It's now Good Friday. And about 10 o'clock in the morning, 3 of the young officers got up. They had no reason to do this particularly, but they wandered down to the edge of the bluffs, looked around, and looking to the west, here coming up the bay are 6 beautiful Spanish galleons with their flags flying, and they are coming right straight for them. Within an hour, the vessels arrive, they land, they drop anchor, and the leader of that vessel comes ashore, and it turns out that he is an old marching buddy, an old fellow soldier of DeLuna. His name is Angel Villafane. And Villafane comes ashore and he brings DeLuna this message. He said, we have got all the food and medicines we could possibly bring. Now, my job here is to, first of all, help your people try to revive, try to restore them physically and mentally if we can. But while I'm doing that, I'm to take a survey. And my order is, if after 2 weeks of such care, I think these people are able to begin again with the mission that was given to you a year and a half ago, fine, then we'll start out. However, if, in my opinion, they can't do that, then I am to put them all aboard these ships and take them back to Mexico. And DeLuna said, well, that's eminently fair. By all means, let's do that. And so they proceeded. And the food is brought ashore, the medicines are brought, and for the next 2 weeks, the care, as suggested by Villafane, is rendered. We come then to the end of that 2-week period, and DeLuna and Villafane sit down to breakfast, and Villafane says, old friend, I am sorry, but there is no way that these people can carry forth that mission. They are sick, they are tired, I am going to relieve them all. And DeLuna said, well, wait a minute. Now, suppose I got 25 men who are willing to stay. We've got tools now on board your ship. We could start building as we would have. And Villafane says, okay, well, make it 50. And DeLuna does get 50 to agree to stay. And so on a given day, the balance of the group, roughly 800 people, are now rowed out to the vessels. They go on board, and DeLuna now is left with 50 people, and they've got saws and hammers and all the things that go with them, and they start doing the things that one would have imagined they would have done 18 months before. They start to build. And that's where we must leave our story today, and we'll bring up the final chapter shortly.